I'm just a Mr. Rabbit, eating every other animal in the forest. Death kind of becomes what you are. After a while, you begin to like it. You know about realization, Wayne? I mean, you know, all this just illusion. Mr. Rabbit says, moment of realization is worth 1,000 prayers.
You're crazy, man.
Wayne, I don't think I'm any crazier than you are. I'm extreme, dark, and light. You know that. I'm light with mouth. That's your shadow on the wall, you know? You can't get rid of your shadow, can you?
So sweet and tender. the mighty. Raw applause. So, everybody, welcome to the last and coldest, I would say, edition of the night talks, late night talks. Tonight, we are with two great artists. Here we have Claudia Bosse. Please welcome Claudia Bosse here. And afterwards, we will speak with Eszter Salamon. She will be here in a minute.
And before anything starts, someone has to, yes, thank you, close the door in order to keep the noise out.
Better, much better.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Claudia, for joining us. You have tomorrow another show, so thank you twice. We really respect your effort to come to us. And as you maybe know already, we asked in every talk the artists to suggest us a topic, what we should talk about. It's not the usual we talk about the piece, but of course the artists are occupied with something, a topic, an issue, an idea, and we asked what would be your idea and your topic. And tonight we will start speaking about spaces, especially political spaces. Where do we find them? What is a political space? I mean, a lot of things come up, actually. We decided, how should we start? We argued a long time, should I start theoretically, or should I start with images? And we decided for the latter, because after your show, it was a coincidence. When I went home to the hotel, I couldn't sleep because I was still kind of upset. I checked my Google news feed, and then I got this beautiful, I think, also aesthetically beautiful picture series showing, yes, of course, it's easy to make jokes about Donald Trump. That's not the issue about here. But he was recently in Southern California checking samples and presenting samples of the Great Wall he intends to build. So this is him in front of one sample. Here we have a sample with lights, so you can watch through this beautiful wall. Here we have several samples, how to climb up or not to climb up. This seems to be the only one which has some color to it, so it was really like a model show a little bit. Also here, the right one, inspired by the Berlin Wall. And here he is, telling us about the future.
Did he decide which wall to choose?
I don't know, it was just a photo series, actually. So, of course, we can start at many points to talk about that. What always comes up when I think about it is a lot of text, but especially Michel Foucault, who 1967, in this famous text on other spaces, had this idea in the beginning that we kind of, somewhere in the 20th century, moved from understanding us as beings in time, us as historical beings, that it changed and transformed, that we understood ourselves as beings in space. That the questions since the 20th centuries are not about developing expansion, like Galileo said, but more about stocking, where to put what camps, territories, borders, limits, all this comes up, of course. And we want to start very openly to ask you, what is your position in all this? How do you think about, not Foucault, but about political spaces? How did you start about approaching this topic, actually?
This is a really easy question.
It's a wide one, you have 5 minutes.
I think in doing art, I would also say it's always about the conditions in which you can start to create and start to think. And so I think it's quite natural to to think about spaces. And space as a production which is connected from different factors. So you have the architecture, you have the programming, how people use spaces, and you have the ideology perhaps, which is put it in the way how spaces are understood and read it in different ways.
And concepted by urban planners, architects.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. And religious space, as like the knowledge about space changes. Mm-hmm. So, but all the time I don't remember the artist who said it should be called as an art piece.
The wall, yeah, someone said that, yeah. I don't remember.
I don't mean either.
We will Google it, internet.
12 different tryouts how to build a wall.
Yeah, like in a model show. Yeah, of course, I mean, it is interesting to talk about your work. We saw the other day the Tanz Platform 2018. Can you talk a bit how you started working, how you kind of concepting the spaces, because you played it several times by now, of course, at very different various spaces in Düsseldorf, in Vienna, and here in Essen, of course. So can you tell us a little bit?
And why you decided not to do it in the theater? I mean, it could also be in a theater, and it's not, and this makes it very special and very, for me, challenging to find out something else. But what is this that you choose these special places?
I think often there are coincidences happening. So I think one part of the work was, for example, in the Hofburg in Vienna with an invitation because they reconstructed the ethnographic collection, and they were proposing a residency to work in this Hofburg, where were still the former vitrines in from the guy who developed Ferdinand, who was shot in Sarajevo, so he was constructing this museum. So this was a concrete invitation where you had the space and architecture, and at the same time it was connected with the collection. So the space is also perhaps the people who are running it, and it's also the knowledge which is perhaps inscribed in the spaces. And the Düsseldorf case was a coincidence because in Vienna we worked because we had a lack of space. I said it in the assembly meeting that all spaces we wanted to work in were taken away because of asylum, places for asylum seekers. So the decision was how to work differently with space and to say, okay, now we go into the urban space and we think about cohabitation. So not a space which is exclusively for the art, which is separated, but a space which we use at the same time with other people. So like here, co-use of spaces. So we have some noise issues and other things, so how to deal with it. And then the invitation from Düsseldorf came, and I didn't had it as a concept, but this former postal sorting place.
It was, yes, a post office, a huge
Postverladestelle.
Yeah, so a place, a building where
I don't know the English translation.
Post is put in order.
Yeah, where all the packages from all over the world were organized and recollected, and this was the place. And this was, and at the same time, there was a call to people who would like to participate in a choir, and suddenly there were a lot of aged people. And the combination of the people who were interested to work with the space then created perhaps a quite important part of the work. So is it then a political space if you have traces from analog work which nearly exists anymore, and then how to read it and how to activate it for artistic work?
And how was it then here in Essen at the Salzlager? I mean, a former industrial site, which is now for years also used as cultural space, and you in there also cohabitant, because there also was this Kabakov installation in the middle. How was you, how long did you work with it? Did you have the chance to work with it? And how inspired have you been by this space here?
So the first thing, because everyone who knows our work, my work for years, always say you always work. When I think about your work, I think about that I'm freezing, and the first information about space was that there's a Fußbodenheizung, a foot heating inside.
Radiation in the floor.
Wow, they are constantly 21 degrees, so this was a really irritating information. And then it was about what it means when a kind of industrial site becomes a museum of its own function, and at the same time there is in the middle thrones a Kabakov, where people said sometimes there are just 1 or 3 persons coming in per day, and also how to deal with a space which is so dominated by an artwork. But taking what was done in Düsseldorf and trying to translate it, it was quite different, because it's you don't have original traces, but you have walls which are done as if they were original. So it's a bit like a museum, like a stage design, you can say, being on an original site, which is quite irritating in the materiality and how to deal with it.
So you were kind of in an art space, but also outside of the theater. Can you elaborate a little bit on this connection? Because I'm actually interested about, is it kind of necessary to go out of the theater to create something political, or is it possible to do it inside, or is the you can argue that the theater is a non-political space in a good sense, where things that you do are like kind of symbolic, in a symbolic kind of way, so you can try things out.
Safe place somehow, huh?
Because of the representational frame, but still, it is never not political. And this is complicated. I don't know. I just want to. How are you working with this ambivalence, maybe?
I would say the theater is a highly political space. The history of the theater has a lot to do with the history of representation, but I think this is perhaps not the right place to elaborate on this, but I think it has a lot to do what you are interested in. And I can say I'm always interested in working in conditions in which I have to reframe things I know, and that everything which is safe in an art context perhaps needs to be proved. Because if you exercise movements, for example, we did many years ago a piece where we worked with nudity on a house under construction. So if you do a movement in a studio, it has a certain connotation and a certain information, but if you suddenly do the same movement while a construction worker is passing, it gets a different notation. So the context confronts yourself with the understanding of your own production, and you have to negotiate in different ways.
That's absolutely true, I agree. And then still, as long as I go into a theater space, and even into the Salzlager, I am kind of a spectator. So I see you're very clever dealing with representation, with spaces, huh? And I think about it. But the moment when we leave the space, like in the procession in the piece, and we go outside, even if it's here, there are not so many people around in these industrial sites here. But we met this one bicycle driver when we were outside, and he were kind of concerned. What's going on here? All these people with the hats going through the side here. So I'm wondering if Düsseldorf, for example, where I think it was in the middle of the city or close to a lot of people who were working and going on, if it's more like an intervention, at least this part of the piece, where you really disturb the everyday space around.
But in Düsseldorf, we didn't left the space, really. There was just one moment during the performance, suddenly two policemen stand in the middle of the performance, and they ask a collaborator if we did see the man with the axe. And we were, what man with the axe? And there was a man with the axe running through the building, and they were looking for him, but they found him afterwards. And this, so it was the intervention on the other side.
Yeah,
so, and I would say often as artists, I'm often interested in how, if you confront yourself with certain spatial conditions, so how you have to deal with interventions by conditions which are implied in a choice of a space. So suddenly it's not about only about doing an intervention somewhere, but this negotiation have to be done on a permanent way.
All the way, yeah?
Yes.
So, oh no, the music is coming already. But will we see more of, nearly, yeah, it's 15 minutes, it's very short. So, I skipped my last question. I was wondering what will be your next project about, but I think we will see your next project anyways. Thank you very much, Claudia Bosse, for being here with us.
I never read a line inside a book, Daddy let it go and mother hook. I'm slipping through the line in front of you at the cinema. We never took a stand and take a look. We seen it and we never gave a fuck. All I turned around, you never asked. It was all for you. We never took a stand and take a look. We seen it and we never gave a fuck. All I turned around, you never asked. It was all for you. We never took a stand and take a look. We seen it and we never gave a fuck. The science I'm about to believe never went up to be free. The science I'm about to believe I never went up to be free. The science I'm about to believe I never went up to be free. The science I'm about to believe I never went up.
But don't you ever even try to believe her? My soul is Spanish medication and pizza.
I never read a line inside a book. Daddy let it go and mother hook. I'm slitting through the line in front of you at the cinema. We never took a stand and take a look. We seen it and we never gave a fuck. Oh, I turned around, you never asked. It was all for you. We never put a line to any good. I'm leaving and I'm done and on the truck. I'm healing and you fix it back in shape. All my sociopathy. We never took a stand and take a look. We seen it and we never gave a fuck. Seen it and we took it back in shape. All my sociopathy. Don't you ever even try to believe her? My soul is Spanish medication and teaser. Well, don't you ever even try to believe her? My soul is Spanish medication and teaser. The science I'm about to believe I never went up to be free. The science I'm about to believe I never went up to be free. The science I'm about to believe I never went up to be free. The science I'm about to believe I never went out.
Next, our last guest
For the whole series.
for the whole series. I'm a little bit.
Sad already? No, let's do this not sad.
We are
Thank
not
you.
sad. We are very happy to have you here, Eszter Salamon.
Thank you for
Welcome
being
on our
here.
couch. Thank you for coming. How was your show tonight?
I lost my voice a little bit, but otherwise it was, very different than yesterday. I don't know. Of course, it's funny to, evaluate how the audience or the spectators, react to work and
what you think is not necessarily what you project, what your sensations are. It's not necessarily what is happening in their mind, but sometimes you see faces and it's like, I just said, like, it was a little bit, a crowd, from the performing arts scene, and probably a crowd from
Gelsenkirchen, yeah.
Together, and then you could see that, there were different zones of interests, or,
But that sounds very interesting. Thank you very much for being here, especially after your show tonight, and thank you for being here with your voice. We decided to start a little to talk about the notion of monument and the idea of the monument series you're working on currently and going on, I guess, since it's a series. I want to show you 3 monuments we found in the internet, so very different monuments. When you Google it, you get a lot of phallus-like statues. One of those would be Otto von Bismarck. This is Hamburg. So not a place where you can gather, but a place where you can look at. Another one would be Lincoln Memorial in Washington, like a temple, a Greek temple. You can go in, and inside this man is kind of reminding me in the beginning of your show, how he's sitting there. Even white, so he's in the dress code. And a third example, of course, the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin, like a space where you can and should gather. Very different ideas. A monument where you can look at, a monument where you can meet inside or in the outside even. I stay with this guy because of the kind of image which is close to your image. Can you tell us a little about your idea of monument? You call a series of performance, or you call a performance a monument, basically. Yeah? Is it like that? What is your idea behind that? Why did you choose that term?
Yes, of course, this title came, with the first work of the series that is called Monument Zero in 2014. And then other works followed, and always starting with the 0, so 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. So it's a series of anti-monuments, you see, because they are never reaching the threshold of 1. So they are some kind of under this kind of level that one could maybe call like official history or canonical history. Mm-hmm. And so it's a series that deal with speculative history making or history writing. Mm-hmm. And it kind of advocates that history is always written from a subjective point of view. It's most of the time pretended that it isn't. So the question is, of course, which are those subjective point of views? This objectivity is completely a false promise and a lie, or they're behind lots of different kinds of interests. And so taking up on this, then of course I place this subjectivity at the core of this practice of speculation. And of course, I defined, let's say, my interests in relating my artistic work or production to history, being it history with a big H or art history or dance history. So creating links between, today and the past, and not necessarily or really not to commemorate, but actually to create memory. Mm-hmm. So I went to maybe visit histories where archives or the value of certain phenomena, cultural phenomena, or certain artists who got forgotten in art history. Yes, and the different projects follow different maybe desires, desire of celebrating, or desire of discovering, or desire of actually relating. So the most important aspect is to create links instead of hiding links, instead of abstracting historical causes or relations.
And to add from a spectator's perspective, we all did that together yesterday night at Gelsenkirchen Theater. So for me, the idea of monument really makes sense because it's not a phallus, it's not a statue you're building, even though it looks like a statue in the beginning. It's a performative action, a performative space where we all meet and create together with you memory. I didn't know much about the person you were talking about, but through this performance I learned a lot and afterwards. Yeah?
But still, I think there's a big opposition between the notion of monument and then this figure that we have. Valeska Gerd, that is a performance artist beginning in the 20s and is really not very prominent in the art world. Why did you choose her, or what was the thing that struck you with doing a monument about this woman that is...
There was a context to it, actually. I mean, I knew a little bit of her work, but very superficially, and somewhere at the back of my head, she was there, but not very strikingly present. And so I got an invitation to participate to an exhibition in 2015 or 16 maybe, and in Salzburg at the Modern Museum, and that invitation actually worked as a trigger, because it was the proposal was for visual artists and choreographers to relate to an archive, which was a dance archive made by a woman called Dera de Moroda, and to propose some, artworks to be exhibited in this context. And then I researched a little bit about this person, Dera de Moroda herself, and I learned that she had some implication in the Nazi government, and she also made a Nazi ballet. And so from the back of my head, Valeska Gerd popped in the front, and I said, okay, I will not research this archive. I will do my own research, and I propose to work on the life and work of Valeska Gerd. So, the situation has really functioned as a kick.
I had the impression that it was not so much like a homage or like a reenactment of her work, but it was like she was a collaborator of you. Like it was like you are not two women on stage, but there are actually three women that are collaborating. Is this something like an approach that you maybe had, like not taking really searching for how can I bring her back, but how can I maybe bring her spirit back or something? How can I be influenced just by something like an energy of her, or something that is not so repeated? You cannot repeat it really. Just do it yourself thing about it. I had the impression.
Of course, I mean, I tried to research about her work, but I very early decided that I wanted to contextualize her work in history and politically, and not only see her as an important but rather idiosyncratic, phenomenon or person or woman in the art scene, because I think many times she has been convoked or revoked in this way. So actually my desire was hard to imagine or fictionalize and speculate about a kind of linking or relationship, which is of course not the back and forth or a reciprocal relationship, but something that one creates as a fiction, and it's for sure the the way we perform or the way we relate it to our work, reenactment was not at all something useful, or we decided not to play with, but more with this idea of how what we have seen on images or very short films or read from her autobiography, how this resonated in us today. How, in which way we were kind of provoked or shocked or intrigued. And me personally, I was very much intrigued by her use of the voice. Mm-hmm. She started already in the 1920s, like when, modern dance was extremely big and, mute body and the, German kind of romanticism and nationalism and everything. She really, her work, the importance, not her little works, but her gesture. As an artist, as an artist mixing theater, dance, poetry, she was extremely influenced by cinema. At the beginning of the 19th century, I think that was really big, and I think her importance, it's at least she's equal of Nijinsky, or, from my point of view, she's just extremely, even more important. But she didn't have the impresario, she didn't have the big machine behind her, and as remaining the solo artist, she just, slipped out and she had to leave Germany and, So how the different steps made her disappear, it's, I don't know her spirit, through some of her text, autobiographical text, though her voice is not there, it's also a choice. Of course, we could have used her voice, but...
There's a huge discussion about heritage in dance, and there's a lot of money going in there. One could also read your performance as a comment on that, or as another approach, actually. Could I say that? Especially when it's about maybe what you're doing is really, it's not an enactment, but you and spirit is one thing, but one could also say you're quoting an attitude, or you're working with a gestus in the Brechtian sense somehow. So kind of thinking what was the, I don't know, I don't like a sense, but what are the main criteria of the work of Valeska Gert, and how to fortschreiben is the German word, there's no really good English one, how to go on with that, how to project it into the future as your own and our own work in the present. Would you say that it's about heritage but in a completely new way, or am I on a wrong path here?
I think heritage is when you have the thing, and then you can receive it. And in the school, no one is knowing. I just said, tonight to some friends, I taught in, very important and important schools in Europe in the last 2 years. And barely any young artist, dancer knew about Valeska Gert. So heritage is, there is no such thing then. In Europe or anywhere in the world one would get. Either you are maybe a researcher and and you decide to make a master or a PhD or an artist or maybe this musician who did some years ago a retrospective in Hamburger Bahnhof in Berlin. It's not the dance scene who organized that. So there is no heritage here. There is creating memory because. Mainly, when we talk about her work, is 4 or 5 works, and it's really just the top of the iceberg. She had 10 times more works, of which we know very little because very little documentation or archive left. So what do you do with the picture? What do you do with the title? What do you do with 2 sentences from her book? So, yes, of course, it's a comment on the important thing of these monuments. There are 2 questions, What do we learn and how do we learn? And what do we remember and how do we remember?
Thank you very much for this talk, Eszter Salamon.
Eszter.
Stay seated for a moment. Yeah.
So, as this is the last night,
We cut it a little bit in the end.
we want to thank all the people that made this possible.
We want to thank you as the audience who made this possible. We want to thank especially Markus Stütz, Chris, Rainer, Marius
Olli, Len.
from the technical support.
Thank you very much.
Special thanks, of course, go to Mighty the Mighty, which is Matthias Mohr on the left.
Andy Lösch and Carlos Casarama.
Thank you for your music.
And
Special thanks also go to Ellie Kräfter, the Produktionsleiterin of this whole format.
last but not least, Matthias Mohr and Stefan Hilterhaus.
Thank you very much for
for the
inviting us and
invitation.
the whole idea.
Okay, have a nice party now. Enjoy the party.
And a great last day tomorrow. Thank you, Sahar.
Thank you, Philip.
You tell me I see your eyes, but it always falls. I see you come, I see you go. You said all things pass into the night, and I said, oh no, sir, I must say you're wrong. I must disagree, oh no, sir, I must say you're wrong. Won't you listen to me? You told me I see you all before. I've been there. I see my hopes and dreams lying on the ground. I seen the sky just begin to fall. All things pass into the night, and I say, oh no, sir, I must say you're wrong. I must disagree, oh no, sir, I must say you're wrong. I want you to listen to me. Goodbye, horses. I'm flying over you. Goodbye, horses. I'm flying over you. Goodbye, horses. I'm flying over you. Goodbye, horses. I'm flying, flying, flying over you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming here tonight. Have a nice travel home. We are Mighty the Mighty. Have nice dreams.